I think there's no doubt that people around the world look at him as an example of what they would like to see more of in their country. Not necessarily a replica, but, a visionary leader with conviction. I don't even want to use strong, I think that's trite. Yeah. But he's a visionary leader for his country, and he has conviction in his beliefs, and he's implementing that. So I think every country needs to be fortunate enough to have one leader who could pivot the country in a direction that everybody else can then push towards. The United States had the founding fathers.
Archie, we got you here in Zonte.
Finally.
We talked about it in Lugano, and you made it happen.
Yeah, it was Lugano, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it wasn't Prague. That's for sure. And when you mentioned it at that point, I was half being polite and half being hopeful that we could make it happen. I wasn't expecting it, and I think Stacey wore me down. It's like she's very difficult to resist, and It was weighing on me that I was kind of rude by declining her invitation last year. And it's a bit surreal that Stacey's inviting me to anything that we're in touch. So all of this is, it's a bit surreal to me. So I really wanted to come and attend. And so when I made plans to attend their Max and Stacey's golf event, some friends said, "Oh yeah, we'll be at Plan B Forum as well." So and that was but a further 2 weeks away. And I took a deep breath, and I'm like, it's already a holiday I wasn't expecting to be taking. So I made the plans to hang around to catch up with them, but unfortunately they weren't able to make it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they weren't able to make it. Not through any fault of their own, but more of a good news thing that just impeded their ability to be here. So I'm like, what am I going to do for another 2 weeks? And I got in touch with Chimbera, and it's like, oh, there are other things happening. Don't worry, we'll do things. And then,
hey guys, we don't do commercials here at the Bitcoin Beach podcast because we want to keep it focused on what's happening here in El Salvador. But we have something special that we're promoting right now because we have the Stay at Bitcoin Beach project that's just been launched. We've always wanted to make sure that when Bitcoiners come to El Salvador, they have a truly Bitcoin through and through experience in their accommodations, in being able to stay at a place that mostly has other Bitcoiners. And so we came up with this idea, and I actually found my buddy Peter here to take the bull by the horns and make it happen. So Peter, tell us what you got cooking for us.
Thanks, Mike. StayAtBitcoinBeach.com. This is the website and the brand that we started, that it will host a growing number of premier properties that we have both in the Puntamongo area and here in El Zonte. The first is Puntamongo Villas, which was the original place that Mike, you and I bought 16 years ago. And it's been newly remodeled. 6 villas that sit upon the best break, my opinion, in the country. But it's stunning. The pool's been redesigned. We've got a bar, the cantina, the full restaurant. Casa Agua Fria is a small little cabin in the same area, and it sits right on the Agua Fria beach. A little bit more intimate. It's great for families that want to go out and kind of get away. And then here in El Zonte, there's 3 properties. First is the City del Mar, which, Mike, you put your heart and soul into, and we're sitting here now in the podcast studio that has 2 main houses overlooking the break of El Zonte. Beautiful infinity pool, gym, just got a first-class place to stay. And then a new condo that just got released in the Barefoot project that's on the other side of the river. 5th story overlooking the ocean. Again, beautiful 2-bedroom. And then 7 suites that we're opening up called Bitcoin Beach Suites that is really close to where a lot of the Bitcoin Beach story started. So when you come, you can use Bitcoin to book your stay right on the website. You also can use it for transportation, for food, for all the services that we continue to add to the business. So we'd love to have you. Please go to stayatbitcoinbeach.com. You'll see pictures, you'll see all the different descriptions and information of the properties, and you can hit us up either on our webpage or on Instagram, and we'll get back to you, and we'd love to have you out. Please come to Stay at Bitcoin Beach.
Once I got here, I guess, the lifestyle sort of takes over, and we were just mentioning before I started to realize things about how I was living back in London that had really taken a toll on me. And I've mentioned a few times, starting Bitcoin Archive was something that was an opportunistic accident that I really threw myself into because just the stage of my life that I was in, and even just thinking about it now, you can see I'm inhaling quite deeply because while I'm very mentally strong and I'm very good in a crisis, I think that comes at a cost that you're not always aware of in that moment.
Yeah.
And so a year of COVID, it was COVID, my career was over. I knew it was over, but I was fairly chilled about it and without even knowing what I was going to do.
And for people that don't know you and your backstory, without getting too far into it, why was your career over during COVID?
I was a contractor, consultant / project manager. Basically, I'm cursed with the ability to do most things that I put my mind to without having a particular passion in the corporate world to go, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, when I started in the corporate world as a graduate on a bank's program, within 6 months, I quickly realized that, it was just pointless, really. I didn't really gel with the corporate culture. I didn't like the Machiavellian politics. I felt that, a job was very narrow and limiting in making use of my skills. And then within all of that, you have to fit within a hierarchy that limits the speed with which not only you develop, but progress as well. And so I found all of that really jarring, and I struggled to come to terms with it because I'm one of those people where if my heart's in it, I will do it as well as anybody possibly can. But if it's not, I'm probably the worst person to be sitting in that seat. Yeah. And I gradually, to be honest, I very quickly became the worst person to be in that seat, but it took a while for everybody else to realize it. Because when you're in a bank, it's there's a lot of slack in a large organization, a lot of places to hide, and people who are seasoned professionals are very adept at hiding, playing politics to make sure they get credit for things that they didn't necessarily do, and hide their inadequacies as well. Anyway, so that was my background. But when I left that job as a graduate, I did find a really good job in another organization, and I did that for about 20 months. Loved it, but I realized that was coming to an end. My manager at that point was quite a bit senior than me, and there really wasn't anywhere else for me to go. And so a year into that job, a friend asked me, do you want to come to London with me? And it wasn't something I considered. So I said no. But then when he left about 4 or 5 months later, I realized that was my next step.
And come to London from where?
From Melbourne. So I'm Australian. People familiar with Aussies, Australians, they could probably pick up my accent. But if you're not, you're probably a bit puzzled about what my origins are, especially with my features as well. A lot of people associate Australia with blonde hair, blue eyes, sort of. We do a lot to push that narrative in our tourism ads as well. So that was a fairly pivotal moment for me. I was really heading to London for the great unknown, only knowing that there was a whole world out there, and I'd been living in a bit of a bubble, given where I'd grown up in a working class neighborhood. And I really just sort of scratched my way into that banking graduate program. And at that point, it was quite a highly sought after program, and I got in, but within 6 months, I'm like, what is this? Is this really what I struggled to make my way into? And it was so disappointing to see that. And, people from really good schools, really good universities were oblivious to the things that I could observe. Only one of my friends and she was from a good school and a very good university and very high achieving student and all the rest of that. She was the only person I could sort of share that experience with. And she kind of prompted me to become aware of what was going on. The irony of it is I left and she's now a 20-year veteran senior banking executive because she's just got that ability to sort of, well, yeah, it's not ideal, but, you know, it's okay.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. She can go along with it and I just couldn't do it. So where does that take us? That brings me to London, where I did a bunch of stuff, you know, contracting, consulting, digital performance, project management, just bits and pieces. I did a bit of FP and financial planning, that sort of stuff, setting up sort of performance frameworks. Fairly boring work, but most work is boring. It's not really intellectually challenging. I think that the most challenging thing of working in an organization is just the politics of getting anything done, because, you know, credit is a sort of a limited currency in a corporation. Everyone's sort of fighting over getting the most credit for the least amount of work. So, you know, anytime you ask for something from somebody, they're like, well, why do we have to do this? And they're like, well, because I'm fucking asking you to. How about that? Like, you know, aren't we here to get stuff done? And it turns out, no, we're not here to get stuff done. So, you know, the good thing about being a contractor and a consultant is that you know that there's going to be a point in time where you just leave and you're kind of outside the sort of the corporate performance management framework. Because if they don't like you, they can just get rid of you. And I could do the same thing. So I quite like that freedom. But there comes a point in your life where if you do that for too long without specializing and then specialize to a high degree, to a high level of value add, like, you know, director level, which I didn't want to do and didn't do, you become sort of unemployable.
Kind of age out.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. And I found that I was missing out on roles that I could do in my sleep, simply because, like, as you get better and better, more experience, the hiring manager becomes more and more junior relative to you. And then they, you know, rather than look at it as, my God, I can get all this value for this day rate, it's like, my God, he could threaten my position because he actually knows more than me. And I encountered that a couple of times. And then, you know, while I saw those signs, it didn't really click about what it meant for me as a, you know, as a professional. COVID made that quite clear. I think economy-wide, the phone stopped ringing, like just cold for months. And after about 2 months, I'm just like, oh, this is futile. And I stopped and just enjoyed myself, you know, enjoyed the break, enjoyed the time off. The craziness of COVID didn't actually affect me all that much. I had some savings and I thought, okay, we don't know how long this will go on for, but the whole sort of, there were so many moving parts and I was challenged to make sense of it. And so that kept me kind of engaged and entertained and distracted, I guess.
And you were in London still?
Yeah, London still. So, you know, very expensive city, not the best place to be sort of jobless with your savings sort of, you know, eroding gradually. So that, you know, I guess it was a bit foolish in hindsight, but I didn't panic. And I stayed there. I should have gone somewhere else cheaper, lower my cost base and all that. But I didn't do that. So it comes to the point where, okay, we're a year in now. And I remembered the 2017 Bitcoin bull market because while I'd known about Bitcoin around 2011, 2012, 2013, I didn't recognize a problem that Bitcoin solved because of my traditional business/finance education. I didn't recognize that. And so I just thought it was, oh yeah, interesting technological experiment. Didn't recognize that, oh, this could potentially be a problem to all the symptoms I was observing. So I didn't buy anything, but I remember 2017, a friend of mine telling me, hey, look at Bitcoin, it's going crazy, it's 10,000. I just, what? I thought it was over, right? I forgot about it. And then the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, 15,000, and then within a couple of weeks, 20,000. I was like, this is crazy. If this doesn't die on the other end of this bull market, I'm not missing out on the next one. And so that thought stayed with me, and I was watching it through 2020, looking for an entry. Probably about 6 to 8 weeks after Michael Saylor bought, I started buying, and within 6 weeks, I was all in. So this is going to lead up to what we were discussing before. January 2nd, 2021, wake up, you know, it's no longer New Year's Day. It's New Year's Day +1. And it's like, what am I going to do here? I'm watching Bitcoin daily, every moment of every day. There was not much else to do. I was online like everybody was. And I just wanted to participate. That was it. So, you know, the first day I had some experience with social media, growing a photography account on IG and watching other people grow. So I understood the power of algorithms and what they could do. And on the first day when I got 150 followers posting as Bitcoin Archive, like, I recognized what that meant. All I had to do was just keep going every day.
That's a lot for one new
day.
account.
Yeah. One day, starting from zero, mind you, right? So like literally nobody followed me. So I just thought to myself, all I have to do is this every day, and this will snowball. It won't stay at 150 followers a day. And sure enough, it didn't. Within 3 months, I had 150,000. Within 15 months, I think 15 months from memory, I smashed 1 million.
Wow.
Million followers on Twitter. And, you know,
And you were just posting news about Bitcoin.
Yeah, just news, observations, a few comments, some memes. But mostly what I was doing was making a central place for people to come and see what's happening in Bitcoin, primarily the news. And, you know, I found my voice, I found a posting style, I developed that, I fine-tuned that so that only the most essential, distilled parts of the news were posted so that you didn't waste any time. And so I did that day and night, 16, 17, 18 hours sometimes, often waking up in the middle of the night and posting as well. I did that for the first 15 to 18 months non-stop. And I didn't take any time off until we went to Sardinia for a week. That was my first holiday. I may have taken like half a day off here and there, but hardly. You know, I'm still watching my phone. And while I was in Sardinia, I had someone doing the news, and then as in like sending me news, and I would still post that, right, and schedule a bunch of things. So it really wasn't fully time off. And so what does that lead to? And we were talking about burnout before. Now I'm someone who's really mentally strong. You know, stress doesn't bother me. I grew up in a very stressful household. I had a very stressful childhood. You know, we had a lot of instances that helped me understand myself and how to react. So I'm the guy you want to be with in a stressful situation. Probably not the guy you want to be with when things are going swimmingly well, because, you know, I will come up with something to challenge us. You know, like with business, I'm like, okay, things are going well, what's next, right? So in that regard, like, and so I didn't recognize some of the symptoms that were creeping into my health because of the excitement of the bull market and also the volatility on the downside as well. I was growing. You know, it was really fulfilling being part of a community and finding that, especially I am an outsider. I consider myself an outsider in life in general. I think it's where I'm most comfortable. I don't really like being the center of attention in a large group of people that I don't know. I'm very extroverted too, so there's a contradiction in terms, but like I'm extroverted here with, you know, 2, 3, 4 friends, but beyond that, and then it starts extending to larger groups, I just want to be in a corner and just shrink and just talk to one person, and I'm happy there.
No, I get that. I'm kind of wired the same.
So like, I really like the fact that I was anonymous. It all happened by accident, Mike. Like none of this was by design at all. I liked that I was anonymous. I liked that there was a history within Bitcoin and cypherpunks of being anon as well, but that was purely an accident on my part. And so I grew very comfortable behind that curtain. I really enjoyed it, not because I can't present the way I am. As you can see, I'm quite comfortable talking to people, but I just grew comfortable with the fact that nobody knew who I was. I like that. And also I didn't want to take the risk of exposing myself potentially to 1 million plus people in a way that I wasn't yet equipped emotionally to handle, for example, So already that's creeping in now that I have doxed. It's been 6 months. The podcast is getting traction. People are starting to recognize me. And I think
And was the reason that you decided to dox yourself was because you wanted to do a podcast?
Yeah, I did want to.
Okay.
I really wanted to do a podcast.
Yeah.
So, from the start, I never really wanted to insert myself as a personality. And I think the podcast, so I feel like I have an obligation to the brand to fulfill its potential, because it's an opportunity that can't go begging. You can't take something like that for granted. Second of all, I do believe, I think I will be eventually really good as a podcast host. I think I'm still finding my feet. I'm pretty close to hitting the mark of how I want to be a podcast host, but that comes with experience, and I'm happy with how I'm progressing in that regard. So how do we? Yeah, and then gradually I became more comfortable with the idea of launching a podcast and doxing myself, but it still took another year and a half or so before I did it. But we're talking about mental health, and so there were some things that crept in. So I am quite a resilient person, and in addition to that, I look after my body really well. I work out most days. I do something. I don't have too many sedentary days where I'm just doing nothing at home. I get out most days. I at the very least, I do a long walk, 2, 3, 4 hours sort of thing. And so physically I felt great, and I feel strong, probably stronger than ever. But then the mental side of things, I hadn't picked up on those symptoms at all. And I thought, am I just down on mood, or am I just not motivated? And I was just telling Paco, motivation, because of the opportunity that I had before me, because of, driving my career into a brick wall, I should say, without realizing, motivation wasn't negotiable. And so I was just on. There was no negotiating about that. And combine that with the fact that, we were in a hot moment of 2 years of intense interest, I knew that would cease someday. I knew there would be a bear market, there'd be a lull, the tide would go out. I knew that would happen. I didn't know when, and I wasn't going to die wondering. So I pushed out as hard as I possibly could. So I carried that cost, that mental cost, without understanding it. And it was only like when I finally relaxed, I've started hiring some people to take over certain bits of the operation from a social media point of view. I'm still supervising that. But the mental thing, man, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't concentrate at all. I found it difficult to read again. It was almost like I'd never started reading literature. Yeah. I found that difficult, and it was painful to me, because it was one of the things that I only got to literature as an adult through my partner, and it was something that gave me a lot of joy. I can't read everything, but the things I read, I really enjoy them. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore. Motivation becomes a problem. So one of the issues, with being chronically online, is your dopamine receptors get downregulated. And so I don't know if it's called insensitivity in the same way that insulin insensitivity occurs, but basically that gets in the way of motivation. I think it's the key driver of motivation. So if you know that there can be a reward at the end of intense effort, you'll put in the effort. But there were so many things that I was just putting off. And particularly the things that I don't like, I knew I was putting those off because, I hate admin. I really hate it, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you're putting that off because you're just being lazy. But there were other things that I kind of liked, like reading, and I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. And there were a few more things like that, but pleasure-seeking things that I was putting off. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I'm using this holiday in El Salvador to reset all of that. 4.5 years of training my brain to be just always on. And, my research in learning how to do that, understanding, there's the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which I didn't understand. And just to give people listening to this a very high level, the sympathetic nervous system is what you use. It's task-oriented, objective focused, when you're motivated to achieve something. And so the parasympathetic is when you're relaxing, and then all the benefits of that arise. So if you're relaxed, you can be joyful, you can be contemplative, you can be, you can hum a song, you can, these sorts of things come to mind. You can be creative. Ideas come to mind in a more natural way rather than a forced way. And so I've been stuck in one, and now I'm trying to retrain myself. And I think I've had some really good breakthroughs because I'm living a very different life here in a way that feels effortless. I'm doing.
And what are some of the things that you're doing that are very different?
Okay, so like I discussed this with Dr. Jack Kruse, and I said, Doc, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm feeling, and he gave me this sort of neuroscientist's version of what's happening. So first things first, I'm waking up before sunrise almost every single day, effortlessly, absolutely effortlessly. In London, forget about it. I'm not doing that, right? And it's not like I'm trying to wake up. At first, I thought it was jet lag, but like we're now 2.5 weeks into my holiday. It's not jet lag, right? There's something about the lifestyle, the environment that is positively influencing me. So I do that. I watch the sunrise, sit there with a bunch of people. It's a bit of a social thing. You get to know some locals, some visitors and we enjoy that. And then once the sun is up a sufficient degree and it feels a bit warm, I'll get into my workout. And I'm rotating between some beach runs, a push-up routine that I'm working on, and it's going really well. Or I'll go down to the skate park, which I'm sure you know where it is, and do some body weight exercises, pull-ups,
I thought you were going to say you were skating in the skate park.
No, I'm not doing that. No. I don't want to break my wrists on holidays, picking up something new. But and just alternate between those things depending on how I'm feeling and whatever. After that, I head back to the hotel, have breakfast, take a shower, have breakfast, come out, and then from there I go to a coffee shop and I sit down and I've started writing again. So I probably haven't shared with you, but a few years ago, I was reading a Hemingway novel, and I just thought I could do that. And I'm being quite honest with you. I literally had that thought, and I thought I could do that. And just to show you like how much of a big ego I have, it was only like the 7th literary novel that I'd read, but I started to see how I'm a bit embarrassed admitting to that, but I'm being honest. That's literally what I thought. I started with a few Cold War era spy novels, and then I moved through sort of to Somerset Maugham, and then Hemingway. And Hemingway writes in a way that makes sort of the story structure and narratives, character arcs a little bit more accessible. And so by the time I got to him, I think it was reading The Sun Also Rises, and I'm like, yeah, I could do this. So I sat down and, rather than just saying I could do it, can you do it? Mate? Yeah. Right. So I sat down and I proved to myself that, oh yeah, I can write. At least I like it. My test readers liked it. But there was something that I was missing. And so that something was like a backstory and a purpose. And I think I found that, and it fits the zeitgeist as well, coincidentally. So I'm revisiting that, and I've started creative writing again. And that's really, really good. We spoke about dopamine receptors. So that's really good to help retrain your brain because
it's not a fast dopamine, dopamine hit.
Yeah, so I didn't really connect the dots there about why starting Bitcoin Archive depleted my dopamine reserves, but being constantly online and
constantly seeing that this post just went viral and
this, yeah. Well, not only like scrolling, which is terrible for your mental health when you do that for however many hours a day, but also when you post and you get the rush of engagement, like, yeah, that's a banger, that's going to fly. That gives you a dopamine rush as well. And so what happens is gradually you need a higher and higher dose of dopamine to feel a fairly low level of satisfaction or pleasure, right? And so you can imagine running something that's like banger after banger after banger all day long.
And then when they don't hit,
that's right. Yeah. And so you stop getting any kind of joy from very regular, ordinary things. And so this writing, what it does for me is it brings back the routine that I had when I wrote the majority of the novel, is of sitting there being immersed in my thoughts and thinking through the structure, the logic, actually then the prose part I consider problem solving, because I'll have something in my mind and I'm like, okay, I'm going to now put that onto the page in a style befitting my writing. And then I will write that, then I'll read it over. I'm constantly editing. So it's constant problem solving, and it's engaging my brain in a way that's effortful, but pleasurable. Like, I really enjoy the problem solving aspect of it. And by the end of a session of 2 hours or so, I feel like I've achieved something. And the really interesting thing, one of the things I found out when I was writing the bulk of the book is, like, I didn't put pressure on myself from a words per day point of view. There were many days where I'd sit down and I'd literally be having coffee and just thinking about the novel. But because my thoughts hadn't sufficiently progressed in terms of structure or some kind of narrative arc, I wouldn't write anything for that day, but I'd feel like it was a perfectly productive day. And then there were other days when I'd write 2,000 or 3,000 words to make up for all of that, because my thoughts had been so well distilled and clarified that I can go, I know exactly what's happening. And I didn't care about the prose in that moment, but I'd go back to it and refine, or maybe add a little bit of a flourish, or maybe remove the flourish, because, the mindset in which you put something down on paper, when you revisit it, maybe it doesn't connect as well. But the main thing is that you're actually pushing the story forward. You're progressing your writing. So I find that an incredibly rewarding challenge that, first of all, it's much more of an effort. It's much more engaging. I have to be, I don't want to use the word stuck in a thought, but I have to be engaged in a thought for much longer. And so what that feels like in terms of progress is that by the early evening, sometimes late evening, I sit down at a particular restaurant, which I don't want to name right now, but I'll sit down there with a novel. So I've got a really challenging novel that I'm actually reading right now. It's Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov.
Oh, that's one of my favorite
Is it?
novels.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm at the point where I'm wondering why this is anybody's favorite, right? Because it's only I'm only 200 pages in, right?
Yeah.
So like it's
the way he just portrays the human mind and struggles is just unique.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely so.
For me, that was a very formative book. I read it during university years, and it was had a very big impact on me.
So one of the things that I struggled with in the first 100 pages was, okay, like what's going on? Like I'm used to reading novels where like the story's being progressed, whereas what I found is like at least with Dostoevsky, if he's in a scene, that scene is the story for now. And so I had to sort of let go of my expectation of progress.
Yeah.
And just...
I mean, it'll come back to
yes, it will.
Yeah.
It's a great novel. So
You're
it's
developing
obviously,
all these different subplots.
Yeah, it obviously has a point and a purpose.
Yeah.
Otherwise, millions of people around the world wouldn't love his writing. So, once I sort of was mindful of that and gave myself over and trusted the author, this guy's a legendary author, I relaxed a little bit more and I was able to read it. But the key sign that I'm making sort of progress with my mental health, and I've had ups and downs in this since I've been here, is that if I'm reading in a hotel restaurant and someone walks past, am I tempted to look up to see who it is? And I've had two really good sessions of about 2 hours of reading where I was completely, how can I say, indifferent to who was around, and I was totally immersed in the reading. And I feel a certain way sort of just right here above my temples as well when that's happening. And I've had other days when perhaps, my phone hygiene hasn't been quite on point, even though it's greatly reduced, where I have been easily distracted. So I'm starting to feel the difference, and I'm starting to see that difference as well. And so all of this to say, it's, you don't know it until you try to do something that once came easily, and then suddenly you find yourself struggling and you don't know why. And I didn't know that was mental health, because I associated mental health with depression. I don't have depression, right? And so like, even though some people in my family have had it, like there was never any risk of me having it.
Well, there's a difference between depression and then like just not finding joy and an excitement in things. You're not depressed, but you're just not like excited if like you were about things.
Well,
before.
I just wasn't. I didn't have the regular motivation of a regular me to do the things that would then give me some kind of payoff. I was just like, whatever. And the reason why that was so confusing is I was still motivated, or maybe, like I said, motivation wasn't a negotiable for my work for such a long time.
It's just like you got to do it.
Yeah, the things that I was sort of locked into doing, I was still doing those things. Anything in over and above that, I was just pushing that off so far into the future and just over and over again until it became a pain point and I had to attend to it. And so that's how you get a messy room, right? So that was a real lesson for me. Like,
and did you realize before coming here on this trip that you were at this stage? Okay.
Yeah, I was aware. I was aware, but I didn't recognize I had to do something about it immediately. But now that I've had this opportunity to do something about it, it's like, we're not going back to that. So there are some things I need to put into place so that I don't have to. It's tricky, but, because like managing the commercialization of Bitcoin Archive for like four and a half years, 90% of it was funded by me. We had a brief partnership early on with one of the companies, but, it wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah.
But most of it's been funded by me. And now that I've started the podcast, I think sponsors are more comfortable sponsoring a podcast than a Twitter account. So that opens up the possibility to do a bunch of things but I'm not very good at that. I just want to focus on delivering content to the audience, right? And that's where I love doing that. That's why I started doing that. And I feel like the business development side of getting sponsorship is a distraction from it. And it's a lot of effort. Like, you need to speak to a lot of companies before you sign 2 or 3 or 4 of them. And it takes a long time.
Well, in the Bitcoin space, it's so cyclical too, of when companies actually want to spend money. So,
well, that's a big miscalculation I made because, I had a small partnership with one company. It was like, once a month I'd post something for them and, for a fee. And I thought, okay, that's not too bad. Maybe this will ramp up over time as people sort of recognize the brand. It never really ramped up. But then I thought, I'll always surely have one sponsor. And even in a bear market, I'll just discount my rates. I discounted it by 70% and there were still no takers. It was like, no.
I mean, a lot of them are just in survival mode.
That's what I mean.
They're
and I didn't
laying
know
people
that.
off.
I didn't know that would happen. I wasn't familiar with the business cycle of Bitcoin. I'm certainly not familiar with, like the ebbs and flows of all the Bitcoin companies and the exchanges and their marketing budgets and strategies or anything like that. And I didn't realize that they wouldn't be as comfortable in a brand or content partnership with the Twitter account, because they certainly continued sponsoring podcasts, for example, and newsletters and the like. So, there's things that you just learn from being in an industry. But thankfully, like I could fund my operation through all of that. And so here we are. We got a podcast. We kick ass beyond what our subscriber level is. We get a lot of views for that. So it's just like, okay, I'm learning from that, the commercialization aspect of it, but I'm still kind of reticent. There's something deep within me that is really reluctant to go out there and network with people with the intention of getting something from them. I know that's just business, right?
Yeah.
I know that's just business development. I get it. I don't begrudge people who do that because it's business, right? But I don't like that. I feel like if I get to know you and then we like each other and then we do business, fine. Or if it's inbound and then I can deal with, but I don't want to put the effort into like, it just feels really uncomfortable for me. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
No, I get that. When you don't feel like you're just being friendly because you're friendly, it's like you're trying to get something.
Because I despise people doing that to me, and they do it all the time, right? It's just one of the perks of having a really big brand and having all that reach is that there are people who just pretend to be friendly because they want something out of it. So yeah, that's where we're at. I guess I just want to make sure I've covered off the sort of mental health aspect of it, because I think that's really important. A lot of people are struggling since COVID. The economy is really pressuring people. Like there was a time when you could just tell someone who wasn't quite doing well economically, you need to hustle more or whatever, there is opportunity there, stop being so negative. But I think actually the system's crushing people, and it's no longer enough to say just hustle harder. There are certainly pockets of opportunity there. But, my thing is like if one person's struggling, that's their problem. But if millions and tens of millions of people are, that's a policy failure. And I think sometimes in the Bitcoin space, we are deaf to that. And I don't know if it's because of sort of libertarian leanings, small government, all the rest of that.
Well, I think it's because we think we see the problem. It's the broken fiat system. And then when people don't want to hear that, I think sometimes Bitcoiners kind of like
put our hands up.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if you don't want to hear it, yeah.
So, which I get to some extent, but also I think we need to realize most people are just in survival mode. And so when you start trying to talk to them about Bitcoin, they're like, I don't have the luxury to be thinking about this. I'm just trying to put food on the table. Because they don't see how it all ties together and how the current fiat system is. Because they think, well, I keep getting raises in my job, but I keep finding, I'm further behind. And it's like, that's because
I have to say that we don't help ourselves either. I think like just speaking to people in El Zonte, like either visitors or whatever, people who are sort of semi-permanently here, I get to know them first, and then, gradually, if we start talking about this or that, their impressions of their experience of engaging with people on Bitcoin is not very positive at all. It's either a brain dump of look how smart I am and how much more than you I know, or it's like a bunch of conspiracy theories. I mean, this is real, right? Like these are people who've had real life experiences with Bitcoiners, and I'm just sort of like aghast and almost like apologetic. I listen to them, of course. And one person said, and I even own some Bitcoin, right? I'm like, oh God, we're so letting ourselves down. Like, I don't know why we do this. Is it because there haven't been enough examples of here's a framework for orange pilling, if perhaps not enough work has been done on that front? Or maybe we just need someone who's really good at, for example, sales and sales techniques. Or maybe we just need to all collectively read How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't know what the answer is.
I think sometimes people that come down get a little overexcited and a little over the top and definitely a little cringe. And so, I get it. I mean, it's, and I think sometimes people too that aren't interested, but they have people that keep, every new person that comes in wants to tell them about Bitcoin. So
it just occurred to me, when people are most interested in Bitcoin, when they've already decided they like me, right? When they've connected with me as a person, and then they're like, it sort of comes out, what do I do? And then they're interested in hearing about Bitcoin because they're wondering why a person like me that they like is interested in Bitcoin. And even so, I don't try to dump on them a whole bunch of information. It's just I will ask them some questions about their lives and what they see in the world and try to relate it on that basis and in a very minimal way.
Yeah.
No philosophy, no authors, no conspiracies, no end of Fed, nothing sort of crazy. It's just, what is a problem in this person's life that I think Bitcoin can solve in a very simple way? And I think one of those is just the cost of living. They understand that. And the other day I explained it to this girl in a coffee shop, and I said, imagine they made 10 million Kelly bags. What do you think would happen to the value of Kelly? Kelly bag is a designer bag.
Okay, I assume so, but that's not my...
So like a Kelly bag is a really highly sought after bag. It's kind of like limited production, all the rest of that. It's highly sought after, expensive. Or maybe it was the Birkin. I can't remember, right? Don't ask me how I know this shit. And I'm like, what if they just suddenly made 10 million of these? What would happen to the value of that? And she said, obviously the value would go down. Yeah, I said, that's what happens to the dollar because they can just literally print it. And, when you have a look at the chart of when all the dollars were created, it's like all in the last 7 or 8 years. And so instantly they understand that. So there's more dollars. And that's why more people have more dollars looking to buy the same number of goods, and then prices are going up. They understand that instantly. So like with Bitcoin, there'll only be 21 million forever. They understand scarcity. So here is an example where, she's a pretty stylish lady, and I've just related on her terms just about scarcity and, finite supply. And they understand that instantly. You don't need to go any further than that. They just people understand scarcity and the value of supply and demand, scarcity, all the rest of that. I find that's just a really powerful point. So everyone's got a different way of understanding that, but the principles are the same. Listen to someone, identify a pain point that they can relate to in a very simple way, and I think you just connect with them only up until that first thing. Don't then layer it on with 4 or 5 other things.
Yeah.
And I think that works quite well for most people. Yeah.
No, I think usually it's better to just pique their interest and then let them kind of dive down the rabbit hole themselves.
Yeah.
As they see it.
How do you do that, Mike?
To be honest, I'm not a great orange pillar. I tend to not talk to people about Bitcoin unless they bring it up or if it comes up. I'm just in general, I don't like to impose on people. So I like to do stuff behind the scenes. I like to, we focus on the community work here and, helping the locals understand, hey, you have the ability to save in a currency that's not going to lose value. And so, but as far as like going out and pushing Bitcoin, I feel like people will come to it when they're kind of ready for it. And it's not, especially in a place like El Zonte, it's not like they're not exposed to it. Maybe in your other places, they're not going to hear about Bitcoin unless you kind of share with them. But I'm not the best orange pillar. So
Can I make an observation? Because this is my second time I've been here.
Yeah.
There are 2 things. When I was here the first time in 2022, it was with Carla and Walker, and it was one of the, I think after Sardinia, this was the first holiday I'd sort of taken. It wasn't long after that. And we came here, and we were going to go and do something. We were both staying at Puro Surf. And, you walk from the back entrance. There's a road that you walk down. It goes downhill, and that wasn't paved at the time. If my recollection is correct, it was all muddy. We were in wet season, potholes everywhere. It was really treacherous to walk down, and we had to hold Carla up because she had her fabulous boots that she was wearing, and we had to hold her up so she wouldn't fall over. Now, when you walk in El Zonte, almost all the roads are paved that I can see, at least the ones closest to the busiest areas, and not just in a sort of haphazard way. They're beautifully paved. They look like really nice solid streets now. So I've noticed that from a development point of view. It's not overly built yet. It's not, people have a fear that this place has already been overrun by commercial developments and the like. It's nowhere near anything like that at all. It largely, to about 97%, looks exactly the same as what I saw last time, except we have better roads and pavements and footpaths and all that.
Some nicer restaurants.
Street lights.
Yeah.
So for the most part, it's only improved it changed in a very good way. I would call it an improvement. The other thing is, the whole Bitcoin acceptance thing, when we came last time, we experienced a lot of issues in that front. Walker trying to pay a hotel bill, not enough liquidity, blah, 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 technical problems. Oh, let me just start that point of sale integration up. Asking staff. So this is 2022 we're talking about. Asking staff. So Walker had this big thing where he wanted to tip every single staff member that we came across in Bitcoin, because that would then encourage them to be curious about it, download a wallet, and he would walk through every single person.
Which I love.
Yeah, he's once he's got a bee in his bonnet, he's really passionate about following through. And so he would do that. Well, Carla and I just sit back and enjoy the cocktails. Here we go again. And it was... And almost none of the staff had wallets. This time around, every single shop accepts, literally like every single shop that I've been in accepts Bitcoin. Every single staff.
And pretty like seamlessly.
Sure. Like it's not even, they don't even flinch when you ask. And in fact, one shop only accepts cash and Bitcoin, low tide, where I've dined a few times, and I've forgotten about that because the first time, embarrassingly, I'd still remembered our previous experience, and I thought, I'm just probably going to pay by card. I've had to reload my Bitcoin wallet twice because I'm using Bitcoin so much everywhere I go. For coffee, for dinner, at low tide, I've been there 3 times, paid with Bitcoin 3 times. Staff all know what Bitcoin is. If they don't have a wallet, they had one before and maybe changed phones or something, and they just download it again and you can tip them. Every single shop, it's just a very natural option to choose. So, I know there's been a lot of criticism of El Salvador in general by some people, but I think the progress does tend to generally happen much slower than people expect. But the intention, even if only El Salvador, El Zonte, is at this level of saturation for Bitcoin acceptance, what an amazing achievement that is. Because it's literally
the only place in the world.
It is the only place in the world that has this level of acceptance that I've heard anyone sort of speak of. Yeah. I know there are a lot of other circular economies, and you'll be more familiar with those than I am. So, you can speak on that. But I've been really impressed with the level of Bitcoin acceptance within El Zonte. It's just wherever you want to go, you can pay in Bitcoin with no difficulty either. So I wanted to just offer that observation to go alongside the recent criticisms by some people, because, what they say may be rooted in the truth of their experience elsewhere in El Salvador, but I've only stayed in El Zonte. Yeah. I came here for a holiday. Yeah, this was not a work trip. It wasn't a fact-finding issue. I don't consider myself a journalist coming here to then, do on-the-ground reporting like other people do. So I'm not discrediting their work. I'm just saying I think El Salvador is very harshly judged. For a small country, if they never did anything else in Bitcoin, but just held on to their Bitcoin, their strategic reserve, never bought another sat, they've done far more for Bitcoin than anybody could have reasonably expected from such a small country. So if they get a marketing dividend and a tourism dividend and an economic boost as a result of that, I think they've earned it and they deserve it. So I just think the criticism of El Salvador is on the Bitcoin front is overdone. It's overplayed. And everyone's got a right to their opinion. I don't begrudge people speaking out, but that's my position on the matter. It's a small country. It was on its knees.
Yeah.
And they were the first to buy Bitcoin at a time when it was much riskier than now. Was it 4.5 years ago they did it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. And just think about, let's go back 4.5 years in time. No ETFs, no ETF applications. BlackRock wasn't orange pilled yet. We didn't have a Trump administration that was, they're proponents of Bitcoin, I guess. They're surrounded by people. We didn't have any of that. The media was overwhelmingly antagonistic towards Bitcoin. We still had a lot of the 2013 talking points as FUD in the media, right? And this small country stood up and said, we're going to accept Bitcoin. Just think about what sort of courage that took, what sort of vision it took. And I think if the perception is a little ahead of reality, I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. Yeah.
Well, I think it became a thing where some people oversold what was happening here, and people expected to come, and nobody was using the dollar. It was only Bitcoin, and so people got engagement by like posting in that manner. Now it almost feels like the opposite. Like you can be the contrarian and posting negative about El Salvador, and that gets you engagement. And I feel like you have a little bit of engagement farming by some people that are using that to their advantage. Maybe some of them really believe what they're saying, but I think you do have some of that. And then you also have just some people that, moved to El Salvador and probably weren't meant to live an expat lifestyle. Like they like things comfortable, they like things a certain way, and so they had to leave, and they like to blame it on somebody else.
Yeah,
so
I say all of this quite literally as I'm speaking, without any particular person in mind, only that I have read some general criticism, right? So like if you're listening to this and you think perhaps I'm speaking about you, I'm not speaking whoever you are. I'm not speaking about you. I'm not. It's just I've seen the criticism in general on the timeline, and it's just through scrolling, and I think largely it's unfair, even if it might be based in truth that most of the country is not orange pilled like El Zonte, but I just think if all El Salvador does is Bitcoin acceptance widely within El Zonte and a strategic Bitcoin reserve, that's incredible to me, right? Compared to where we were 5 years ago. That's an incredible achievement. What are we talking about here?
Well, I think people just underestimate how how slow it feels when things are actually being rolled out. But when they write the history books, it'll be like overnight. Bitcoin took over in El Salvador, where really it took 10, 15 years for it to happen. But
that'll be 3 bullet points.
Yeah.
15 years covered. Mike started Bitcoin Beach. Bukele was elected, right? And by 2025, they were accepting Bitcoin like magic. It's like 3 bullet points, 15 years covered like that. You know what I mean? So I think it's good to be impatient because, it's the basis of ambition and all that. But let's just keep it in perspective, what this country was and what it has done.
Don, I love hearing your perspective and experience, because the reality is, like most everybody, I have my routine. So I have my stores that I go to, and they all take Bitcoin, but I don't know all the other stores out there. So I love hearing when other people come and they're like,
I discovered a new coffee shop. I won't name it now. And I got talking to the owner, and he's saying we take about 15% of our revenue in Bitcoin, right? Now, I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Because most of the people going there are not Bitcoiners. And so I said, what do you do with it? Because we just keep it. That's our sort of dollar cost averaging. So I want to talk to him. I said, look, can we talk about coffee tomorrow? And just sit down, and then we'll see, I'd love to hear your experience of that, El Salvador, because he's been, I'm sure you know who he is. He's been here for almost like 15 years or something like that. And I want to talk to him about his coffee experience, because I love that.
Yeah.
And I love Salvadoran coffee. I was really surprised by that. I love the coffee here. And I want to know about their Bitcoin experience, because, what they're doing right now is like a Bitcoiner's wet dream, Bitcoin Maxi's wet dream. Just a random coffee shop accepting Bitcoin and then just putting it into their strategic reserve. That's our savings, right? Isn't that like the ideal scenario? Every Bitcoin Maxi is like, and every company's going to accept Bitcoin. It's like, and save in Bitcoin, and they're literally doing that. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with him. I wonder if I can convince him to come on the pod, because he doesn't know who I am in terms of this yet, but I think he knows I have an interest in Bitcoin, and that's how I like to approach it. I don't advertise what I do. It's not how I relate to people. I just want to know people as people, and then once
that would be fantastic if you got him to come on the podcast.
Yeah, it will. You know what I'm talking about, I'm sure.
Well,
you have a hint.
There's 2 people that it could fit. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk offline about that.
But no, I think that would be great to have him on the podcast and get the perspective of a non-Bitcoiner who is, taking Bitcoin and saving Bitcoin and is becoming a Bitcoiner kind of through this.
Yeah, and I think as people who are in the Bitcoin community, we should remember that most people who hold Bitcoin are oblivious to the online culture.
Oh yeah,
they don't care. They've never seen it.
Even a lot of the major whale holders that hold thousands of Bitcoin don't know anything about the Twitter Bitcoin and all of that.
Yeah, it's not you're not really having an impact that you think you are by being a keyboard warrior, right? You're not having the effect that you think you are. It's the vast majority of people couldn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And was it like 100 million holders across the world? What's the biggest account? Is it Sailor? But Sailor's got a lot of general interest as well, right?
Yeah.
So he's got about 5 or 6 million.
I'm not sure.
Bitcoin Magazine's about 3.6.
I think Bukele has like 8 or 9 million.
Yeah, but he's the president, right? He's the president. So it's like, I wonder how many of those are Salvadorans.
That's pretty impressive, though, to as a president to have more followers than you have population in your country.
Yeah. I think there's no doubt that people around the world look at him as an example of what they would like to see more of in their country.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a replica,
Yeah.
but, a visionary
Aspects
leader
of it.
with conviction. I don't even want to use strong, I think that's trite.
Yeah.
But he's a visionary leader for his country, and he has conviction in his beliefs, and he's implementing that. So I think every country needs to be fortunate enough to have one leader who could pivot the country in a direction that everybody else can then push towards. The United States had the founding fathers. What a gift, right? Like, could Congress get together? How many of them were there? Were there like 30 or 40 of them or something like that?
No, I think there was less than that.
Yeah. Let's just say 20. Do you think there are 20 congressmen who could write a document the way the founding fathers wrote the Constitution? No way. There's just no way. They don't have the ability, right? They don't have the intellect. So how lucky was the United States that at that particular point that you had a collection of people, such a high caliber collection of intellectuals.
And some of them were so young at that point, too. It's amazing that they had the forethought to include the things that they did. So getting back to what you were talking about before about the mental health thing, what do you see like going forward that you're going to make some long-term changes? I just ask because I've been, and I've shared on the podcast before, I feel like most people in the Bitcoin space are very health conscious and are very healthy. When I started Bitcoin Beach, I was actually very healthy, was surfing all the time, was in very good shape. And then it just became so all-consuming, the travel, the constant meetings, everything that, after 3 or 4 years, I had gained probably like 30 pounds. I wasn't like sleeping at all. I had my whole routine became unhealthy. And it's only been in the last 2 years, well, really in the last year, where I've like gotten back to setting my circadian rhythm, gone on the carnivore, eating plan, have lost a lot of weight, lifting weights again, getting back. When I started tracking my sleep a year ago, I was averaging 4.5 hours a day. Now I'm to 7.5 hours.
Really good.
And so, and I just feel like so much, but like I just felt like I wanted to die. I was just like, I feel horrible. And I thought I was dying, but I didn't realize it was just, I wasn't taking care of myself. So I've been making these changes, but I'm just curious for you, it sounds like you take very good care of your physical health, but do you have like a plan going forward?
I do. I need to continue reading. I think reading was one of the first things I sacrificed when I started Bitcoin Archive. And the reason for that is just the prolonged effort of concentration to follow a story when you're reading. And so I think that goes a long way towards offsetting anything I do on the phone. And then be more mindful about the screen time here, and it needs to be purposeful. So I do need to spend some time scrolling and overseeing the account and all of that, but it needs to be purposeful. Sometimes I'm opening and closing the same apps 3 or 4 times in a loop between a number of apps with zero purpose and not realizing until the end. And I like, what was that about? Why did I even do that? And it's just habit forming. I've got these mental loops that's what I used to do. And so because I sacrificed reading, I think there was no counterbalance to continue that sort of, to maintain that long stretch of concentration. Probably need to take, at least 10 or 15 minutes of just not doing anything. But I think in addition to that, I need to find some time, and I don't know what sort of frequency, but I need to find some time to sit and literally do nothing to the point of boredom. And so in my research, one of the things that I've come across is that if you're just sitting there, and you can be mindful, you can be breathing or whatever, but at some point you're going to get the urge. And that urge is to check. And you're going to come up with an excuse in your mind to do that. But that is only an excuse. You don't need to check. You don't need to see what time it is now. It's not important. Like, you really don't need to see it. Or you're going to be like, I wonder if that email has arrived yet. But you don't need to check that email, right? It's not important. Right now, so recognizing you're going to get that urge and then resist that urge. And if you can sit there long enough such that you get that urge 3 times, I call it like an enforced act of boredom, but then resist that. I think the ability to resist that builds a kind of resilience in your brain away from that mental loop that I've reinforced for so long. So I want to find some time to do that, to get that discipline back. And hopefully my mind sort of just lets go of those subroutines that I've sort of practiced over and over, who knows how many times.
I think it's helpful. I've instituted kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, but my morning routine, I just go sit out here and watch the waves, and feels, obviously so blessed to be in this beautiful setting to be able to do that. But to just sit and watch the ocean, you're not being productive, you're not accomplishing anything, but I feel like that is so healing for my brain, especially as I'm starting the day and trying to like as you were saying, reset that like dopamine, addiction, and just kind of like, I think there's something about, and I know there's science and studies have been done, but just what bodies of water and just the positive impact they have on your mental health.
I do that twice a day here in the morning when we're anticipating the sunrise, and it's actually a little bit of a social experience because there are other like-minded people who, the spot I'm talking about, where all the surfers are.
Yep.
And so last time I came, I didn't venture down towards that area at all. I mostly stayed in the hotel. This time I'm very much in the community and experiencing it as part of the community as well, and got to know quite a lot of people. Very friendly, very nice. So it's a bit of a social thing. We're all just sort of in the morning vibe. Some people are having coffee. I just like to sit there and, fist bump people who are coming and joining in, say good morning, and then we watch some waves, wait for the sunrise. And I might do that in the mid-afternoon as well. In addition to that, reading, a stretch of reading. So if I can do that together with the writing, I'll have to sort out some kind of routine because, I still need to work.
Yeah.
Right? So I still need to work. This is a holiday, but I'll need to find out some kind of routine. Do I write in the morning or do I read in the morning? But I need to do both of those things regularly. In much the same way that I alternate between, I love lifting weights. And for the longest time, I neglected cardio, for example. And then when I did really heavy weights and much lower reps, that I couldn't really, my body could not tolerate such poor cardio. And so I had to reintegrate that stuff back in. So it's kind of like the reading and the writing, a little bit like my lifting and the cardio. I have to find a way to fit that into a week such that I get enough of both because they power each other. The better my cardio is, the better my lifting tends to be. And it's the same with my reading. I think the reading powers my writing a great deal. And I find it really satisfying to read a good book. It feels like an accomplishment. It feels like I've peeked into someone else's world. I do like it. I don't know why I was so lazy for most of my life and I just did not want to read fiction at all. I just thought it was a pointless thing.
Really?
Yeah, I really did. I avoided it all my life. Even as a child, I remember we'd have quiet time, I was in primary school. All right, everyone, go and pick a book in the library and we're going to have quiet time and read. And I just keep picking the same book because when it came time to summarizing what the book was about, prove you've read it, like I already knew what it was about, right? So do the work once and get the benefit like for the rest of the semester. It was I don't know why I did that. I just didn't like reading fiction, but now I love it. There are a few things I enjoy more than that. Probably a really good movie, which is so rare these days as well.
Yeah.
But the ability to sit there and focus and concentrate and be gripped by a story, it's fascinating. I love it.
I grew up very avid reader. I loved reading, but I feel like I've lost that recently as I've moved to audiobooks and feeling like they're just more productive because I can do other things. But I feel like it's not the same as
But
reading.
what do you like reading?
I like reading. I like reading novels. But I also like reading, like financial books and things like that. But I feel like going back to the printed rather than the audio, I think would be healthy for me. So I'm glad you brought this up today.
I think it's perfectly acceptable for audio for any kind of business, non-fiction, but absolutely not for fiction. Because I think fiction, you've got to read the word off the page, digest it, imagine it, picture the scene yourself. You've got to generate the scene for yourself. And I just feel like someone's doing that work for me, and they're determining the tone, the pace, the cadence with the spoken word. And that's because if it's just so business stuff, it's information that I'm downloading, right? And so what I found is that this was a real struggle for me, going from someone who's only ever read, non-fiction business sort of writing, because the technique I used for that unknowingly was I'm scanning for information and then forming the narrative in my mind. Whereas when you do that when you're reading fiction, you miss nuance all the time, and that changes the essence of a story. Every single word has importance. That's the reason why it's there. Whereas mostly with business, it's business writing. It's like I'm just scanning for information here and there, and not every sentence is essential. Certainly not every word is. But then it took me a long while to make the adjustment in style and reading styles when I started reading literature. And then when I realized that, I was much more patient, because I'd read a page and I'm like, what? I don't know what happened. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
And I'd have to read it again. And it became really frustrating to me because, it wasn't paying off. And I'm like, how do people do this? And it was really agonizing to make that adjustment. And once I did, and I can follow a story, follow a narrative, marvel at the choice of words, for example, that just turned the sentence. I really started enjoying that a lot more, yeah. And sometimes it's just someone's writing style. So like my favorite author is Somerset Maugham, but it's not the author whose books I've read most either. I think I've read more Hemingway than Somerset Maugham, but I just love the style with which he writes. There's a flowing nature of his prose. It's soft and descriptive, and it's got a flourish, but none of it's overdone. It doesn't feel like any of it's labored. It just feels so natural to read, and it's really, really beautiful. Whereas when I read Hemingway, I know he's pioneered his own style. It's much more sort of matter of fact like. And I know he was a journalist, so it makes sense that it's basically bang, 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 like a statement of fact after another, and that's also has its appeal as well.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing that you're like soaking in like the El Zonte life. Like this is what makes people like me wind up living here, is you just kind of realize, there's so much natural beauty here. There's such great daily rhythms. It's funny, you talk to so many people that like plan on stopping in El Zonte for a night, and like a month later they're still here. They've canceled 3 sets of flights because they don't want to leave. So I'm glad that's the kind of experience that you're having, and I hope the rest of your time here you just get deeper and deeper into that.
Thank you, Mike. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better since when was it again?
It was Lugano.
Yeah. I'm trying to because I try to remember what was the room
I think
like.
I was like the 7th podcast you'd done that day.
Yeah, it was an exhausting schedule. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the room we were in when we were talking. Yes, it was the Lugano business conference room that we were in. And so what a magnificent city that was. And coming here, thank you for your generosity in allowing us to use your studio.
Oh, definitely.
Like I said, I thought it was just a room with 2 cameras. And this is the most magnificent studio I've seen. So congratulations on that setup. It's really made this trip sort of whole in a rounded sense, that I got to do a little bit of work, meet some people, introduce some invite some people that I hadn't really connected with before just to have a chat. And it's really made the trip whole for me. I've really enjoyed it. When you extended that opportunity to come here and use your studio, I just thought, well, thanks, but I'm probably not going to come, truth be told. But now that I'm here, I mean, it's been so good in so many ways. So thank you for all the work that you do, and being so welcoming and generous as well.
No, we love when podcasters can come through and share with people what they're experiencing here. And like you said, we've got this beautiful studio here, so I love to see it used. So I'm glad it's. How can people follow you?
Oh, okay.
Obviously,
that's really easy.
Bitcoin Archive.
On Twitter, it's Bitcoin Archive. I've secured that handle now. But I'd much more rather everyone go onto YouTube and sub there. It's a new podcast. It's 7 months old. It's a real challenge, and I'm really up for the challenge of growing something that's, it's not from scratch, but we've doubled our subs in the last 3 months. It's a really growing
that is amazing
YouTube account. I'm finding my feet as an interviewer. I'm really enjoying that challenge as well of, developing myself professionally as a communicator, and hopefully we get some really good.
And what's the best way for them to find that when they're searching
Bitcoin
YouTube?
Archive with Archie on YouTube.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
And it'll pop up.
Yep.
And definitely subscribe. I know a lot of people don't want to go through the hassle of that, but it helps for the algorithms. It helps the people out there doing all the hard work. So, and it's really easy as a viewer. You just click on the button, and then you'll be notified. Sometimes I feel like
there's still an algorithm at play there as well. Yeah.
But definitely check out the podcast, and you can even go back and look at the episode that we did together.
That we did,
in Lugano.
yes.
Yeah.
Getting to know you.
So, all right, Archie. Well, I hope you find some other great people to interview while you're here, but that it doesn't feel like work, that it feels like vacation still. And guys, look out for the episodes that he releases from Bitcoin Beach.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, Bitcoin family, we want to kind of end the podcast this month with a special tribute to our dear friend, Andy. As a lot of you guys know, Andy recently passed away after battling cancer. And Andy was really the heart and soul behind this podcast getting off the ground. He was the one that kind of helped convince me to do it, that designed the studio, that came up with the format, and did the great intro that we had, and has really been the energy behind it. He brought Paco in and kind of trained Paco to take over the daily production, but Andy still always had his kind of fingerprint on what was going on here. And so we just ask you guys to really be keeping his family in prayer, his wife Suez and his daughter Maven, as they kind of struggle through this time. And we just want to give a shout out to Andy and just what an amazing friend he was. He was the guy that everybody loved. You didn't find anybody who didn't love Andy. And so rest in peace, brother.